In the spirit of the Yuletide, I think we are in order to say Feliz Navidad, wherever you're watching us from across this lovely continent called Africa and beyond. My name, of course, is Bernard Akede, and if you're just joining us for the first time, this show is called Report Desk Africa, or as we like to call it here, RDA. Again, my name is Bernard Akede, and I'm joined by a lovely lady who is dressed appropriately for the season.
It was just a coincidence. My name is Blessings Mosugu, and this is Report Desk Africa. Bennett has called me sidekick, and I wear the hat graciously. Well, this is the program where we take you through the top and trending stories across the African continent. We look at the present situations, compare it to the past happenings, and also our future expectations. So you are in for a great 1 hour this evening, or whatever time you're watching us on the African continent. So don't go anywhere. Today we'll be talking about two very important topics, and one of which is the repatriation of the African artifacts, that's Benin bronzes or artifacts in general, by Germany. And we'll also be talking about Kenya's president's 100 days in office. Has he failed to fulfill his promises, or has he done justice to that? So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after the break.
News Central TV, Africa's #1 storyteller, has come with the best of both worlds. With a combination of news app and live TV, we ensure that you keep track of the latest headlines, breaking news, and in-depth analysis from professional journalists from around the continent. Download the News Central TV app on Android and iOS and get started today. Don't forget to follow us on News Central's social media platforms. News Central, Africa First.
Thank you for staying with us. Now, the return of stolen artifacts from Europe to Africa has largely been seen as a welcome development. These art pieces are part of Africa's culture and heritage. But while there's celebrations concerning the return of these artifacts, there also is a school of thought that is skeptical about how these African countries intend to preserve these artifacts like they have been preserved for decades all over these countries in Europe. News Central's Omolola Ololade shed more light on this particular issue.
Germany's Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock has handed 22 artifacts looted in the 19th century back to Nigeria at a ceremony in the nation's capital, Abuja. The return of this set of Benin bronzes follows a deal made earlier in 2022 to transfer ownership of more than 1,000 of these precious objects.
We are here to right a wrong. Officials from my country once bought the bronzes knowing that they had been robbed and stolen. After that, we ignored that Nigeria's plea to return them for a very long time. It was wrong to take them, but it was also wrong to keep them. This is a story of European colonialism.
This follows a series of returns from Europe to several parts of Africa in the past few years. France, Britain, and most recently Germany, amongst others, have all sent back stolen artifacts to Africa after several decades. Some of these artifacts have been sent to northern, eastern, and mostly western parts of Africa, with Nigeria and Benin Republic being the largest recipients.
Restituer les biens, ce n'est pas une question de victoire pour quelqu'un, échec pour d'autres, parce que dans tous les cas, ce n'est pas une bataille. C'est juste que le Bénin, qui a reconnu de façon identitaire certains de ses biens sur d'autres territoires, a manifesté donc le besoin d'accueillir ces biens et renforcer le développement.
Il s'agira pour nous de mettre en place des infrastructures. Et je peux vous dire que la mise en place de ces infrastructures sont très avancées. On est déjà à l'élaboration, on va dire, des plans architecturaux pour ces lieux-là. Il y en a 4 ou 5.
But these repatriations have come with concerns. Will these countries be able to preserve these art pieces like has been done in Europe for decades? In an exclusive interview with News Central, the Edo State governor in Nigeria, whose state had also received artifacts, explains the state intends to keep these artworks in perfect condition.
And I think the other issue was, how will they be kept? We've gone quite far in working with particularly the German government and a few other investors. We have an independent trust that is currently in the process of raising funding. The designs are ready for us to now build the kind of facility that is as suitable to hold these works, just the set of facilities that are like where the works are currently being held.
Hopefully, the returned artifacts can and will enjoy their stay back at home, maintaining the quality and conditions they have enjoyed in Europe for years. Omolola Ololade reporting for News Central.
Well, that was an elaborate and comprehensive report done by our correspondent Omolola Ololade. Now, we've seen that these art pieces are not just art pieces, they are symbolic of our culture and heritage, and at that they hold a lot of value to us. So there's been a lot of disparity as to the return of the artifact. We've seen that Annalena Baerbock and the minister, the representative of Germany, was all smiles while returning these artifacts, but some people were saying that it's all pretentious. I mean, why is it coming now? There's been a clamor for it that Nigeria and Africa at large has been asking that these things be returned to us because of the value they hold to us. Anyways, we'll be joined now to discuss this by Dr. Temitope Fagunwa from the Department of History and International Studies, Osun State University, and of course, News Central's correspondent, Dapo Adegboye. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Now, let me ask Dr. Temitope my first question. There are two schools of thought. And some people believe that these artworks should remain in the custody of European countries for, proper preservation while having some kind of arrangement with the countries of origin. And we all know why that is. There's been this talks that even Nigerians don't value these artifacts as much as the Westerners do. And then some other people believe that these art pieces should just be returned because of the value that we place in them and how symbolic they are of our history. Where exactly do you stand in all of this? All right, I'll direct this to Dapo because we don't have Dr. Temitope yet, unfortunately. But Dapo, if you got the question, could you please give us your own stance on this?
All right, thank you once again for having me on the show. As always, super excited to be here. Well, it's a good thing that right now we are beginning to see a lot of Africa's history being returned in terms of ancient artifacts. We know that before now there's been a lot of clamor. There have been, of course, pressure to the international community, to the Western community, to restore and return those artifacts. Now, part of the words that were used during the return is they referred to that era as the dark colonial age. That's in the words of the German representative when they were returning this particular set of artifacts, about 21 or so of them, And before now, we've seen that the US and also London also returned some artifacts in the past. So it's a step in the right direction. But the question on the lips of many is that why now? And should it just be the artifacts alone? Shouldn't Africa to also get some sort of monetary compensation with it? Because, these artifacts were on display in some museums in Europe, right? They made money from it. People go to the museums there, they see these works on display, they pay, some of them, quite a number of them pay, to gain access to some of these things. They've made money from it over the years. As a matter of fact,
Dapo, talking about making money, that was going to be my next question. Okay. Basically, should it just be return of these artifacts, or should there be also some kind of monetary value attached to returning these artifacts? Or should we just leave it at the fact that the artifacts, and even after returning them and adding money on top, as we say here, there should still be money, some money is made. How do you evaluate, how do you put a value on how much money should be paid to these countries upon return of these artifacts? Like you just said, some monies have been made over the years, over the decades, centuries if possible. How do you evaluate this amount of monies that have been made? I think we have Dr. Temitope back online. Dr. Tope, can you hear me, please?
Very well, I can.
Okay, so Dapo was just responding to the question that Blessings asked earlier, saying should these artifacts be returned to the countries, their countries of origin, or should there be some kind of arrangement because we may not value them so much over here, where they still remain in Europe, while whatever is being made on them, is repatriated to Africa?
Well, I think it is very, very germane for us to understand that, the question of the repatriation of our artifacts, the artifacts of the African people, is first and foremost a demand that stems from the necessity for us to reclaim our identity as a people. You cannot begin to negotiate whether they should be returned or not.
It looks like there's all smiles receiving these artifacts, but just like Dr. Temitope said, these things carry heavy meanings. These are things that we hinged our tradition, our culture, our history,
our heritage,
on, and then it was just taken from us in the most vicious of ways. So returning it with all smiles and promises, and it looks like this is going to set a basis for bilateral relationship. A lot of people do not subscribe to that ideology. You can't just take something for us, and it wasn't just taking and they went AWOL. It was taking and we kept clamoring for the return. We kept asking every year, almost every time, asking for them to return it, and it looked like out of the magnitude of our hearts, they just decided, okay, today is a good day, the sun is up shining, it's a good day to return the artifacts. It doesn't look like it has as much meaning to them, or they understand the value that we place on it. And then it's also looking like even we do not understand the values that we place on these things. Dapo, what do you think?
Okay, so I think that like I said earlier, it's a step in the right direction. But I just want to slightly deviate a bit or add to will I say this particular conversation as to how do we even authenticate that these are the original
that were stolen? I was going there.
Right? So, I mean, let's go to Europe, where you have the paintings of the Mona Lisa, and quite a number of them. Things. Right now, there are counterfeit duplicate copies all over the place.
There are even there are rumors that it's not the originals that
exactly.
You see when you go to the
how can we even authenticate that this particular returned artifacts are the original copies? That's number one. But I don't think it's a conversation that we can exhaust at this time. Now, back to your question of placing a value, that's monetary value on this artifact. Trust me, that might be hard. But I think that some sort of reward, monetary reward should accompany this particular returns. The reason is this. Europe made so much money from this artifact. We know that some of them were on display, in museums, in places like London, across Europe, and they made tons and tons of money from the display of this artifact. So, I mean, why not? Africa should also benefit from this, right? Definitely. So it's not even a question of debate now. It's a stolen object, and you are returning it back to the owner. So I think moving forward, number one, there should be some sort of monetary compensation as to this returned artifact. And then number two, in Africa too, I think the government needs to do a lot to encourage tourism. When last, let's ask ourselves, when last did you as an individual visit a museum? If you're to visit places right now on your bucket list, will a museum be part of it? So how do we encourage people to visit, a historic site in Africa? I remember back then, the last time I think I had such an experience was in secondary school. For quite a number of Gen Zs right now, that may just be a boring place to go. So these are areas, gray areas, that I think need to be tidied.
Definitely.
Well, I mean, rightly said, Dapo, so many children have history has been lost in translation for them. And I would also like to say...
Sorry, blessings. How many schools still take history now?
Well, right? I read that history, in Nigeria, history lessons will be returned to school curriculum, I think, come the next session or next term, I'm not sure. But I know that it had been taken out at some point, but now I learned that it's going to be coming back. Again, you can see that there's a gulf. For those years that history has been taken away, students have lost a lot. And like they say, if you don't know where you're coming from, you probably wouldn't know where you're going to. But let me quickly jump to Dr. Fagunwa. I hear he's back with us now. Now, of course, there's the inevitable question of preservation. Now, do you think African countries have what it takes to properly preserve these art pieces? And I'm asking this because in that report you saw, I spoke to the Edo State governor, who has received a lot of these stolen artifacts. I actually, coincidentally, am from that particular state. Well, I am from that state, I beg your pardon. And he said that there's a program in place that is in partnership with some German institutes where these artifacts will be properly preserved such that they will be kept almost in the same temperature and the same condition as they were in Europe for several decades and possibly centuries. Do you think African countries, Nigeria and others, Benin Republic, and even North African countries that have had these artifacts stolen, have the capacity to preserve them so that they're in good condition? That is one of the arguments that the European countries have been pushing forward.
And in fact, let me just say that the country that is leading in this, whole, perception is the United Kleptomania, the United Kingdom. A country that has no moral right whatsoever to ask other countries if they can, manage stolen materials, in their domain. I think it is hypocritical for all of these nations and their apologies to be saying that is Africa ready to house this artifact? The United Kleptomania is historically a free country. The entirety of what adorns United Kingdom, or so-called United Kingdom, is nothing but a product of stolen materials. So I think they are not within their moral, jurisdiction to be asking if African countries have what it takes, to house these materials. But let me say that it is in fact not the business of the African heads of state. Because understandably, when you look at the struggle for the repatriation of the African artifacts, and let me say this struggle has begun ever since the 60s, way back since the 60s. You have, in fact, First Act 77, it was a leading discussion that, this artifact should be repatriated to the continent. It is not a struggle that the African government at whatever point in time has seen it as a major interest, as a point of interest. They've never been interested. And that is why the struggle for the repatriation of this artifact have consistently been raised by organizations, cultural organizations across the continent, not the likes of Nana of Ghana, not the likes of Buhari of Nigeria, because they've never been interested. And that's why I'm saying that these so-called governments across the continent do not have what it takes, to hold on to this or to house these materials. Indeed, we have museums, but let us don't make the error of thinking that African artifacts are made for the museums. I think that is totally incorrect. The concept of museum is nothing but an alien concept to the African cosmological belief system. It is not in our culture to have an artifact be stationed in a particular room. Only
All
just
right, but then again, Dr. Temitope, I would like to ask, if they're not placed in the museums, what else can they do? Where else can they be found?
Which is where I'm going to. They do not belong to the museums. So let no heads of state talk about putting them in the museums. Museums are alien to the African cosmological belief system. These artifacts have got to be returned to where they belong to the shrines. And you must understand the fact that the society you and I we are living in right now is not a knowledge-driven society. Because had it been it is a knowledge-driven society, those state governments will invite linguistics, we invite historians, we invite those within the field of humanities to deliberate on particularly on where these artifacts actually belong to. They belong to the shrine, they belong to the people, the common people. They belong to, the ordinary makers, the spiritualists, and what have you within the African, context, and which is what the government of Cameroon did some time ago. They took those artifacts from Germany and they took them back to the shrines, to where they belong to, because it is in our cosmological belief system that, these artifacts are not just images. They are not they are deeper, versions of our spiritual connections.
So, Dr. Fagunwa, sorry to interrupt you here. So, my next question was going to be, looking at the state of our museums, what can be done to improve and to revive them? But you've clearly said that these artifacts do not belong to the museum. So, I'm guessing that we should say, what should we do to revive the state of our shrines, since the artifacts are going to the shrines instead?
Exactly. And
okay.
You see the brother is but you see, this is the point. That is what I was saying earlier on, that you need to invite archaeologists, you need to invite historians to be able to carry out proper research on where this artifact, the artifact that was stolen by the British in 1897 in Benin, were from the shrines. Not just the shrine, not just the private shrine of the Oba of Benin, but the shrines of sculptors, the shrine of artists, the shrine of ordinary individuals, and it is not true that we cannot go back to this place. We cannot trace the original, origin of these artifacts. We can indeed, because you see, our ancestors were, extremely brilliant, and they had great form of intellectualism. And that is why when you examine this artifact properly, you can really tell what group or what house, what compound these artifacts represent.
Well, Dr. Temitope, I apologize for interrupting again, but I would still like to stay on that fact. I mean, we cannot, let's be honest here. What is the guarantee that those shrines will still not be invaded and those artifacts looted? Because I think a year ago or 2 years ago, an Oba's palace was invaded and some of the artifacts there were taken by Africans, not even those outside. So what's the guarantee that, and I want to throw this question at Dapo. I would like to ask for your opinion. Do you think that they belong to the shrine or they should be kept in the shrine, knowing the state of Africa and the mindset of Africans, because some people will still be interested in looting those and sending them back to the people who brought them. You know, so do you think that they should be taken to the shrine or just kept in a museum where at least it looks safer?
All right. I mean, I listened to the doctor there. Extremely brilliant submission. But then times change, right? Those artifacts, yes, some of them might have come from the shrine. But again, if we backdate, right now the style of worship, even the gods that they worship back then at that particular shrine, there are several questions to be answered. Will the shrines still be there? That's number one. And then number two, if that particular shrine is still there, the resident spiritualist probably would have moved on to other, I don't know, gods or something. So
other occupations.
Exactly. So there might just be some sort of mismatch.
Dr. And then number two, smile on your face.
Wait, number two.
I'm sorry, Dr. Temitope, do you agree with that, or is there something you want to say?
Okay. Does he want to react or do I continue?
I saw a smile on Dr. Temitope's face, and I would like him to react to that.
Yes. Okay.
I mean, Brother Dapo is making a very good case, I must admit. Again, you know, we are living in the 21st century. But, you see, when we, you know, come up with the word shrine, understandably, it is what it is today in this society, in the sense that there's a form of hostility towards indigenous spirituality, indigenous form of worship, and what have you. What we realize is that you cannot go to, and I'm saying this because I'm frequent in Benin, you cannot go to Benin, for an instance, and not pinpoint to the shrines of each compound, in spite of the fact that, you know, we have this so-called modernity. In Benin, each compound still have its own shrine. Of course, they try to keep it away from, you know, the general public, you know, and what have you, but it still exists. And I'm saying that the government can play a role, of course. The government can play the role of security, you know, if need be. Because, you see, there's something about these spiritual objects, these artifacts, they are spiritual objects, as we have agreed. They are, you know, embodiment of our existence as a people, our spiritual existence. And that's why in earliest African society, the artifacts are there for us to be able to commune with our ancestors. You know, ancestral worshiping was a big deal for us as African people. So I'm saying that we must not, you know, look down on our spirituality as a people, because it's spite of over 500 years of attempts by Christianity and Islam to, you know, to weaken our spirituality. Our spirituality is still on core.
Okay.
Well, I would say
Dr. Fagunwa, yeah, I was ready to come to Dapo. Dapo, you are going to make another point. I would like you to quickly make that point, and then we'll take final words from you and from the doctor. Okay,
so my point is this. I think it will be better if they're in the museum. For number one, for knowledge transfer, for accessibility, people can come to the museum, learn about history, learn about, you know, life, learn about even the artifact itself, the style of worship and everything. And also number two, for preservation and security, right? Once it's in the museum, one can tell there's accountability. You know, it's within the custody of the government. To a very large extent, it can't be stolen or restolen. And then in terms of the preservation too, you can be rest assured that, you know, even though we have a poor maintenance culture, but to a very large extent, you can be sure that in terms of preservation and maintenance, that is settled. So for me, I would rather, you know, say that to avoid mismatch, confusion, and all of that, and also for posterity, I think it's better, you know, in the museum.
All right, Dapo, I'm from Edo State, and I think I understand what Dr. Fagunwa is talking about. I have my own reservations to what you have said, but unfortunately, time will not let us go there. Dr. Fagunwa, I would like you to please give us your final take on this whole issue. One sentence.
Well, I think it's a great one that we have this artifact back, but I must say that our struggle is just still on course within the context of the fact that UK, the United Kleptomaniac, homes the greatest number of our artifacts across the African continent. And this is a country that is still insisting that, these artifacts belong to their museum. In fact, they are calling it their colonial heritage. You can imagine how backward and how irritating that can be. So I'm saying that our struggle just, commences or is still on course, in the sense that we must continue to insist that these artifacts must be repatriated. Of course, maybe they will end up in the museum, or it is a discussion for some other time. But for someone like me, I'm saying that they be stationed in our shrines is about the best way to go about it. But it doesn't really matter right now. We just need them back, right? And we must continue to insist on the repatriation of this artifact. And I think what Brother Dapo said earlier on, monetary gains, you see, some of our persons carried out a research recently, and they discovered that over 50% of the annual revenue generated by the United Kingdom is from the British Museum. And
Right.
the British National Museum is nothing without the African artifacts.
Okay,
So
thank
see,
you so much.
agree.
All right,
Dr.
thank you
Fagunwa,
so much,
but we have to
Dr.
leave it there. Dapo, one quick sentence, Dapo, before we leave.
Okay, a quick sentence is it's good that we are having all of this back, but I think that the most important thing right now is knowledge transfer. We need to reintroduce history into our study curriculums, and also people need to be aware. People need to know about their history and appreciate it. Yes,
all right.
Africans in particular.
All right, thank you so much, Dapo Adegboye, and of course, thank you so much, Dr. Temitope Fagunwa, who's from the Department
by the
of
way,
History
seems to
and
have
International
a
Studies.
very interesting angle to the word UK.
Yeah, most definitely.
Thank you so much. I
Dr.
mean, from the passion he spoke with, we could see for obvious reasons. I mean, we know that he's more passionate about the values of the artifacts that are being returned. But thank you so much.
Thank you so
both
much
of
for
you
joining us, gentlemen. Thank you. Now, to be honest, I think one of my favorite movies, most favorite movies, is Black Panther. And in the beginning part of the movie, there's a place where Killmonger, the bad guy, went into a museum where he was going to steal the object. I've forgotten what it's called now. And the museum keeper was explaining some of the art pieces. And she clearly said that this one is knock art from the Edo people of Nigeria.
Oh, wow.
Very interesting, right? It's just to depict exactly what it is we're talking about here. By the way, Edo is what it's called. But it clearly explains again what it is we're talking about, how several parts of African culture and heritage has made its way illegally, stolenly, if there's any word like that, into European countries, and how it is now gradually becoming part of their own colonial history rather than African, traditional culture and heritage. So yeah, like you clearly mentioned, a lot of knowledge and information has to go into all of this.
Well, I mean, speaking from the African perspective, which I am, by the way, I'm African, and seeing how all of this is turning out, I'm not a fan or an advocate of diplomatic rows, but it just looks as though these people are doing us favors. They decide when to return these artifacts, and then we welcome them with open hands. Again, I'm not saying that there should be some sort of dramatic reception or anything, but if we keep giving them the impression that everything they do for us are favors, I mean, returning our artifacts that were stolen from us in the first place, it seems like doing us a favor, then how on earth are we going to end this circle? It's a vicious circle, and I'm hoping that there's an end to it. And this just points towards the fact that it looks like we're taking anything that is being thrown at us, and I hope that it doesn't last for too long, because if it looks like if they have the opportunity to take it again, they will do that, seeing how we welcome them with open hands.
And one last thing, I do hope, like Dapo said, how do we authenticate that these are actually the original pieces? That's another question. That's a question for
Nigerians will
day.
say, it reached to ask in the pidgin language.
All right, we're taking a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be moving away from West Africa. We're going to the eastern part of Africa this time. Someone who has been celebrated as the boy who grew from chicken farm to the presidential villa has celebrated 100 days in office. We're talking about none other than the new president of Kenya, William Ruto. Do stay with us.
News Central TV, Africa's #1 storyteller, has come with the best of both worlds. With a combination of news app and live TV, we ensure that you keep track of the latest headlines, breaking news, and in-depth analysis from professional journalists from around the continent. Download the News Central TV app on Android and iOS and get started today. Don't forget to follow us on News Central's social media platforms. News Central, Africa First.
You're still live with us on Report Desk Africa. Many thanks for staying tuned. In case you're just joining us, you have missed the first half of our conversation where we talked about the return of the Benin artifact, African artifacts generally, to Nigeria by Annalena Baerbock, the representative of Germany. And, you know, we had a pretty interesting conversation with Dapo Adegboye, our in-house analyst, and of course, our traditionalists who seem to have a different meaning to UK. And, you know, they gave pretty detailed explanations of their opinions, and we're grateful for that. Anyways, now we'll be talking about, we'll be going to Kenya, where yesterday, or would I say the 21st of December, Wednesday, 21st of December 2022, made it 100 days since President William Ruto took over office as the fifth democratically elected leader since Kenya gained her independence. Now, President William Ruto was sworn into office in a peaceful handover of power following a fiercely contested elections. Now, he made some promises, and, you know, this has made some Kenyans, even when he made the promises, some Kenyans were optimistic, while some were skeptical that he would not be able to fulfill. So we will find out now whether or not he had fulfilled or made good on his promises. Well, we have a report by News Central's Adesewa Odusoga, who gave us more insight into this topic, and we'll be right back to talk about this on the back end.
President William Ruto has spent 100 days in office since being elected as the fifth president of the country after a fiercely contested but peaceful election. During his inauguration in September, President Ruto promised to reduce the cost of food and fertilizer, improve access to credit for small and medium businesses, and make Kenya a thriving investment and business destination, amongst others.
We anchored our campaign on the platform of the economy premise on job creation and the well-being of the people of Kenya, and we have been working continuously on the measures to bring down the cost of living.
However, the president took a quick turn after assuming office, removing food and fuel subsidies introduced by his predecessor Uhuru Kenyatta, deepening hunger crisis and causing prices of fuel to soar.
If I can tell you we've been here for 3 good days, inamaanisha ya kwamba there's nothing yenye tumepata yenye tunapeleka kwa nyumba. Unaona, hata wale ambao wanafanya hizi biashara za cab, wanafanya hizi biashara za cab, they cannot do it anymore.
Within the first 100 days in office, the president has recorded hits and misses. Parts of the misses include not fulfilling plans to have 50% of women appointed to the cabinet, naming just 7 women to his 22-member team, operationalization of the Judiciary Fund, affordable housing for public services and police officers, and lowering the cost of living. Amidst the unfulfilled promises, however, the president within the stipulated time successfully established a women's rights agency at the office of the president, as well as setting up a 50 billion shilling hustler fund. Analysts says the administration may need more time to understand the challenges and actualize their plans, which require more than 100 days.
The first 100 days are always difficult. This is a new government. You know, you get the feeling that these people in government had underrated the running government. They didn't know how huge it is. It's not easy to run government. Government is big, and the challenges, you get the feeling they are beginning to understand it's not as easy as they thought. For that reason, we will forgive them for some of the mistakes they are making, and we will give them 5 out of 10.
President Ruto's pet project, the 50 billion shilling hustler fund, has also sparked controversy, with some accusing him of reneging on promises to make the credit scheme interest-free. Adesewa Odusoga reporting for News Central.
All right, now joining us all the way from Nairobi, the capital city of Kenya, is journalist, and he is Emmanuel Too. Emmanuel, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much.
All right, Emmanuel, let's jump straight into it now. On News Central Television here, we covered that elaborate election and the whole process that led to counting of the votes and everything that happened. Let's start with the general assessment of what President Ruto's administration has done so far. From your own evaluation as a journalist who probably also followed the election and the campaign period, how will you rate his government so far, in your own opinion?
Well, it's difficult to give the president a score, but as a person who covered the election and, of course, covering the politics around the country, he has fairly done some of the things that he wanted to do. It's been only 100 days by yesterday, and the president has tried. Some may say he has not been able to achieve some of the things that he wanted to do within 100 days, but there's still about 4.5 years to go before the end of this term. But just as the report that has already been done by one of your reporters has already detailed, there are some of the hits and the main achievements that the president has already been able to show, including the Hustler Fund, the 50 billion Hustler Fund kitty that was that he promised to give the medium, and the small businesses an opportunity to thrive. And so far, about 11 billion shillings has been taken by the Kenyans, the common people, to start their businesses. But there's a challenge in terms of the amount that is being repaid back, because it's just about 2.5 billion shillings or thereabout that has been returned, meaning that about 70% of the amount that was taken has not been returned. But that is one of the biggest hits for this government. There's also that issue about the fertilizer prices. The president said he's going to subsidize on production and not on consumption. And at least the prices of fertilizer have gone down by almost half, actually half. But there's still a challenge in terms of accessing the fertilizer that can be used for production. Something else that the president has been able to do is look into the West. The president has made about 2 trips to the UK, and actually one trip to the UK and another meeting with the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak earlier in Egypt. And of course, he has been in the US twice. The first time when he went for the UN General Assembly meeting, and recently when he attended the US Africa Leaders Summit. And so there's been some change in terms of what the president is trying to do and how he's trying to push his agenda going forward.
All right, Emmanuel, let's still refer to the reports we just saw and still talking about the prices of fertilizers and some other things. I mean, Kenyans will disagree that he has done a lot in that area. I mean, yet we know that he still has a lot of time. But in this, within this 100 days, we hear that the president removed food and fuel subsidies after promising to reduce the cost of food and fertilizers. So it seems like we're seeing a very ironic case here. Would you say that much has been affected by this decision, and how would you say that Kenyans are reacting to it?
Well, many Kenyans, remember, over half or almost half of those who voted for the Azimio candidate Raila Odinga, and they're the ones who are disgruntled. But generally, Kenyans are still reeling from the effects of the high cost of living. The prices had been subsidized, the prices of fuel, and of course, which has a ripple effect in terms of the prices of the basic commodities, and they're still very high. And Kenyans are still hoping that something will be done. But to that effect, it is a very dicey situation, because some are saying the subsidy in terms of the main or the common items that Kenyans buy should have been retained, because you cannot subsidize for the future, yet right now Kenyans are still suffering. And that has been one of the biggest issues, and one of the issues that have been fronted by the opposition led by Raila Odinga right now. But President Ruto seems unperturbed, and he says that he is moving towards subsidizing the amounts that can be given, or just in terms of the production. But to be honest, there's still a very big challenge in terms of the cost of commodities. And just like any other place, Kenyans are still suffering, even as the president clocks 100 days in office.
Okay, and another place where I think the opposition might be taking a jab at the president is, appointment of 50% of women to his cabinet, but has only named just about 7 women to his 22-member team. Now, what does this say about the gender equality, gender parity? Remembering, also considering that his direct opposition, talking about Raila Odinga, had a woman for a running mate. It's a low blow at the president, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. The president has to contend with this, because he had promised 50% of the seats in the cabinet to go to either gender. That means that for the women, it had to be at least 10 or 11, and for the rest, for the men, the remainder. But that has not been actualized. But the president has always maintained that there are other positions outside the cabinet, including the permanent or the principal secretaries to different ministries. There are other positions that are yet to be filled, which includes the chief administrative secretary positions, who are almost like principal assistants to the cabinet secretaries. So he says that it is the process of building these full government is still on course, and it's not lost for the women folk, but of course there are still jitters about whether he kept his promise. But what he says is that there are several dockets that require some sort of expertise. And of course, the women who are appointed to those positions are still spearheading that. But we wait to see how things will pan out, whether he will live to his promise to give those other positions to women as he had promised.
Well, people have also criticized President Ruto's 50 billion shilling Hustler Fund pet project. I mean, Emmanuel, we seem to be seeing yet another ironic situation. He had earlier promised to make this interest-free, but this is far from interest-free in a country that has zeroed out on subsidies of food and subsidies on fuel. Where do small businesses stand in this mix?
Well, it is a tough call for the president, but from what he had already said, he's comparing the about 8% interest rate on these Hustler Fund to what other Shylocks or other business associates do, those money lending schemes do, or what they charge. And he says this is a bit fair because, but it was really a very big about turn from the president, because he had earlier said that nobody is going to be, there's not going to be any interest charged on these. But in a meeting that was held in some of the rallies in some place called Kericho in Kenya, he said there's nothing that like free money from the government. And but the biggest challenge right now is the rate of repayment of that money. Because the Raila Odinga team had told their supporters not to support or return that money because there was no legal background in terms of why that money was given out, and they were saying Kenyans should just have it. But we've seen the opposition soften their language, and of course telling their remaining mum about whether their supporters should pay back that money.
Well, apologies,
sorry.
Emmanuel, but I can't help but mention Charlie Ruto's new office, never before seen before, office of the first daughter. I mean, she came out with the new office, and you know, this sparked a lot of uproar. I mean, people are asking what was she thinking, and then again she's come to defend that, saying that it is a private entity. But why come public for a private entity? I just want to know what's going on there.
Well, we're also asking those questions, but there's a statement that was sent to that effect by the first daughter, who was also making the buzz on social media and every other place. And she came out and cleared the air, saying that the office is a private office. But the reason why she had to introduce some of the officers in that office was still something that is still mind-boggling. But she said that, and we're talking about Charlene Ruto, that is one of the daughters to the president. Of course, we haven't seen this before in previous presidents' positions. We saw the first daughters and even the first families taking a back seat, and we only saw the first ladies in the other regimes, of course, remaining silent, and of course just helping the president or their father to that effect from the background. But maybe she's trying to carve her niche, and of course just set some grounds for 2027, because we've all seen the daughter for Raila Odinga, that is of course Winnie Odinga, saying that of course being elected to one of the legislative assemblies for the East African region, and Charlene and others, or the daughters of the president, have not been given any positions. So perhaps it's just a plan to try and feature and, of course, plan some of the plans for 2027.
All right, Emmanuel, thank you so much. This might just become a new trend in other African countries.
Oh, it shouldn't. It really shouldn't.
All right, thank you so much once again, Emmanuel, for joining us.
Pleasure.
All right. First daughter position, from first lady to first daughter. Quite interesting.
It is a trend that should stop. Because
it hasn't started yet.
Yeah, but it should stop. I mean, it should stop before it even starts.
All right.
I mean, I understand the fact that she might want to carve a niche for herself. It could have been her lifelong dream. Or when my dad becomes president, I want to do this, I want to do that. But you don't just wake up in the morning and build an office for yourself, carve a niche for yourself in the administration. It doesn't work. If you want to go into philanthropy, you can do that. You can, build a little business of your own going for you. But you don't build an office in your father's administration. It doesn't work.
It's her father's administration, not your father's. And she has looked into the future, like Emmanuel said. Let's go to Adesewa, our colleague, who is also looking to our own future to see what just might be happening in the forecast segment. Adesewa, take it away.
Okay, so now that I'm seeing the future, I'll take you to the future. But of course, this has happened, but we are looking to, monitor the stories on News Central TV. Welcome to the forecast segment. Thank you, Bernard, and blessings. All right, in Cameroon, the government has deployed troops to its port city of Douala following, trying to stem a wave of gang violence. A police report shows that the clashes saw hundreds of youth arrested and forced some shops to close their doors during the normally hustling holiday season. And now, away from Cameroon, we go straight to Malawi, where large numbers of children working in tobacco farms in Malawi are missing school, according to United Nations appointed independent human rights experts. Now, the United Nations is urging the government of Malawi and the tobacco companies there to step up human rights protection across the supply chain. And straight from Malawi, we go to Zambia. And of course, the World Bank is also trying to, assess the economic downturns there and reviving their economy. Now, the concession credit was the second tranche of the World Bank's $275 million concessional development policy financing for Zambia in support of the Zambia's reform. Now, the World Bank is saying that the concessional disbursement in 2022 was to provide strong support for and in recognition of the remarkable leadership to reduce fiscal deficits and implement difficult reforms. And that's all in the forecast segment. It's back to you, Bernard, and blessings.
Thank you so much, Adesewa. Quick question before you go, ladies. Who's hosting me for Christmas?
It has to be Blessing. She's the one wearing red.
It has to be? Oh, wow.
Okay.
I said this before and I'll say it again. It was a coincidence. You guys don't judge me by that.
Well, that's fine. Thank you so much once again, Adesewa.
Thank you so much, Bernard.
All right.
It's been a very interesting segment.
Yes, it has been,
I really enjoyed the conversation from both our first topic, our second topic, Office of the First Lady, First Daughter?
Of the First Daughter.
That's a very interesting one.
When you get there, create your own office.
I will not. I won't.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone who has been a part of the show. Thank you for joining us. We do hope that you join us again, same time next week, same station. My name, of course, remains Bernard Akede.
And my name is Blessings Mosugu. Have a lovely Christmas and a Happy New Year.